Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, what we know about the West is that what it fails to achieve militarily, it seeks to accomplish via public relations. And so, the first item on the agenda is this massive information campaign, information, disinformation, you can choose your own word, that they are waging, claiming that the food shortages, the inflation are somehow the responsibility of Russia. And of course, they need to do this because, while the passive Western media, happily write down every nonsense that American and European official declares, people in the rest of the world, particularly in Africa, are not buying this. And so they're coming to Europe and say, hey, these sanctions that you have imposed, they are causing food shortages. And the European response is, no. The only people who are responsible for food shortages are the Russians. And the Russians are lying. They're waging a disinformation campaign. And so I want to just look at it as an example of this. Josep Borrell's news conference the other day, in which he addressed this issue and the issue of Kaliningrad. And it's kind of interesting how he essentially, if you read what he's saying, he pretty much says the Russians are telling the truth. Where's the lie? But let's just go over that and then see that here we have the he's saying here, Russia is blocking Ukraine exports, not us, Russia. Russia is destroying Ukrainian ports, destroying food stocks, destroying transport infrastructure, Russia, not us. And that has sparked a global food crisis when more than 20 million tons of grain are being blocked in Ukrainian storage, and someone is preventing this food from reaching the consumers. Some will suffer from hunger. This is a deliberate attempt to use food as a war weapon. This is a deliberate attempt to create hunger in the world in order to put pressure on the world and on the European Union and on Ukraine. And the typical playbook of Russian propaganda, they create a problem and then they blame the others. And they blame European Union sanctions. They blame the European Union sanctions as the ones responsible for the food crisis. It is not our sanctions, it is Russia's actions. Notice this, he comes up with this 20 million tons. Which,
and why does he have to keep, protecting the European Union, European Union? I think he protests a bit too much there.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes on, we are listening to the concerns of some African leaders. The African leaders are saying, these sanctions, they're not helping. And then I informed my colleagues, this is the EU foreign minister, that I've sent a letter to all African foreign affairs minister explaining how our sanctions are being tailored, how they work, whom they affect, what they can allow, and what's under sanctions or not. At the same time, saying that we are ready to study in cooperation with the United Nations cases that could happen because of overreaction, overcompliance by some economic actors or some market avoidances by some economic actors. They do not do what they could do. It is not forbidden. But certainly if Russia sends a warning saying it is very dangerous to navigate in the Black Sea, this increases the price of insurance. Well, it is dangerous to navigate the Black Sea if you put mines in the Black Sea and you haven't secured the mines properly and they're floating down towards the Bosphorus Straits. But it's, well,
yes, and there's always the next step of secondary sanctions. Nobody wants to touch this.
That's right.
Nobody wants to get here.
That's right. But notice now he's admitted that overreaction and overcompliance, in other words, it is your sanctions because producers around the world are looking and they don't want to fall afoul of the European Union sanctions regime. They don't want to be driven out of business, their bank accounts raided and whatever. So yeah, over-compliance. I mean, it's a little like Stalin's famous article about dizzy with success. So, too many people were just a little bit carried away by what they were supposed to do. And Russia has put a tax on exports. Well, they put a tax on exports, not now, they put a tax on exports last year as a way of stabilizing food prices at home, because there was, they were exporting too much, and this was causing shortages at home, and therefore soaring food prices at home. So they put a tax on export, but that was last year. I mean, so he's suggesting that somehow this is something they place these tax on exports now, which they didn't. People complain about.
On top of that, George, it was more than a year ago where we saw a steadily increase in agricultural prices. Okay,
right.
So this is also a reaction to it, because it was more profitable to export food and not have it on the domestic market. That's why they intervened and said, we got to make sure there's enough for our domestic market, because we know you guys want to make extra money because prices are high on the global market. It's called supply and demand again.
That's right. See, if you put a tax on exports, the prices will go up. Who put the tax on exports? Russia, not us. We are ready to study any case in which something wrong happens from the point of view of the economic actors. Maybe we have to study it. The sanctions against Belarus taken before the war on the export of potash can affect the dissemination of this product around the world. Maybe. So in other words, you've been lying to say that your sanctions.
Sherlock.
So he says, first of all, no sanctions on food and fertilizer. Well, maybe we did put sanctions on Belarusian fertilizer, and we will study. Maybe that's affected the world markets. Hey, you think? One of the biggest.
This is like this whole thing is a self-own. Keep going.
But our sanctions are not responsible for the food and fertilizer trade in the world, because we only take decisions that affect the European Union member states, not third countries. This is he's a real genius here. He doesn't even seem to realize that the economics means everything is connected with everything else, and the decisions you make is going to affect everybody else's decision. Oh, this is just the European Union. We're not touching anything else around the world now. We impose sanctions on Russia, but hey, we don't mind what anyone else is doing.
And on top of it here, since he invokes the European Union member states here, is that grain and other agricultural products that Ukraine normally would be exporting to North Africa and other parts of the world are going to Europe, not to their original destination. So the European Union is benefiting from this.
That's right. I repeat this once again. I will send these letters to all my colleagues from Africa to explain what we are doing to respond to the food crisis and how we can engage with the authorities. And we are going to send letters from the European Commission to all financial actors and to all economic actors explaining what they can do, because our sanctions do not forbid them to participate in the trade of food and fertilizers with Russia and third countries.
It's too late.
It's too late.
We will explain to them. Okay, the European Union is confiscating assets from individuals, private citizens, threatening companies. So your letters, Mr. Borrell, don't mean jack to anybody. Actions speak louder than letters.
That's right. So notice he starts off, the Russians are lying. And then well, what are they lying about? I mean, everything you're describing is exactly what the Russians have said. Yeah, I mean, what you've done, it's affecting insurance markets. It's affecting third parties. Yeah, you're messing up the entire world market in grain. And then he was asked the question. So his question here is about the food crisis. Would you say today that Europe has lost this famous battle of narratives that you have often spoken about, the battle of narratives? Oh, so we're back on the disinformation campaign. No, we haven't lost a battle of narratives, but there is a battle of narratives. There is a battle, and it must be fought. It is not because we are right that others will give us reasons for free. So we face the typical attitude of Russia, namely, when faced with a problem, it's the fault of others. Yeah, quite. You kind of a little bit of projection.
Pure projection.
And we prepare a speech to say it is the others who are at fault. and that you have to work on it. You have to commit to it because there are people who have reason to believe it. That's why I wrote those letters to the African foreign ministers, and that's why we're open to discussing any concrete issues there may be. But I do not compare a concrete problem that can affect the activity of an insurer or a transporter or a bank in a concrete transaction with the fact that there are more than 20 million tons of seeds blocked in Ukraine and that there are 30% tax on Russian wheat exports. Well, I mean, you know, it's still going on about this 20 million tons of the grain block. Again, there's just no way it can be 20 million. I mean, they're getting a lot of stuff out. And 20 million is what Ukraine exports in a good year. So I don't know how they can have 20 million stuck there. And again, as the Russians have pointed out many times, they've made endless offers to Ukraine for safe, maritime passage out of the Black Sea. So, you know, and as well as the ships. I mean, the Ukrainians are not even allowing the foreign ships to leave the ports. And so again, the tax on the wheat exports, you don't know. Of course, as the prices go up, if you put a 30% tax, the prices will go up. So again, he's talking about something that already happened long ago. He's still going on about this 30% tax that the Russians imposed. So we have to fight this battle of narratives. We win battles if we fight them. And I call today on all ministers to do this proactively. That's why I wrote those letters. That is why we will be very attentive and very cooperative with the United Nations to resolve any problem that may arise. But one thing is to recognize that there may be an implementation problem, and another thing it's another thing to say that it is the fault of the European sanctions, when it is quite obvious that the European sanctions do not target the exports of Russian agriculture. So he goes on.
No, they want to, and they've done a remarkable job of throwing Russia out of the international financial system. Okay, so this is why this is happening. You can't transact things. That's as a result of the sanctions. I don't care if we're talking about agriculture or any other product. Okay, you need a financial system to transact. If you're not part of it, you cannot transact.
That's
okay?
right.
That means you can't get things to the market, Mr. Borrell.
That's right. That's right. And then you have, you know, physically you can't get to the market if ports in Europe are closed off to Russian ships, and other ships are not permitted to land in Russian ports. Doesn't Borrell think that maybe that's going to affect the availability of food in the rest of the world? And again, ships are going to be very wary that the shipping companies are going to be wary about landing in Russian ports, where again they might be subjected to sanctions. Not to mention insurers who want to stay the hell away from insuring any ships engaged in transactions.
I don't know if you came across this, but some Russian ships have been impounded. And so the US and European taxpayers are paying to make sure that they're kept, afloat. So they're paying even more money. They're sanctioning themselves. Okay, you seize the ship, you dock it, and then you have to keep its upkeep.
Yes.
Okay, this is what another derivative effect of these sanctions.
That's right. That's it. Yeah, yeah. We did not. So it said, do not target the exports of Russian agriculture. If there is a problem with Belarusian potash, we will study it. How long does it take to study? I mean, is it kind of amazing? I mean, this the Belarusian potash thing. That's from last year. Well, that was at the time of the
potash is a complicated thing, George. Don't underestimate the complexity of potash.
I mean, I think, didn't they impose this at the time of that whole Ryanair thing? It was that when they imposed all this.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that's when they said, okay, so that was a long time ago. That was already about a year ago. They're still studying the Belarusian potash.
Go after the pot. We'll get him. We'll get him with the potash. He'll be overthrown with the potash.
But it is necessary to study concrete specific problems here which affect and not the general discourse in European sanctions as what they would be capable. This is the worst disinformation talk, and the Russians invest a lot in this, and we have to do the same. We have to do the same. So, yeah, we have to engage in disinformation. Again, a nice little self-own. Yeah, we have to do the same. We have to get in with the disinformation. And then he puts this, you see the parentheses they put in, obviously in the text, invest a lot to fight this battle of narratives. You know? Otherwise somebody will say, yeah, we have to do the same, disinformation. There's a problem with Belarus and potash, we will study it, but yeah, and then he says, yeah, the blah, blah, and we have to do the same, blah, 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 so, and the general discussion. Okay, so then this is just repetition. And then he's asked, yeah, you said there are no restrictions on sanctions on food exports or fertilizer exports, but what about President of Senegal, Macky Sall's complaint that the SWIFT sanctions are hurting African countries' ability to purchase food and fertilizers? That's an interesting question. Do you take this complaint seriously? Are you considering any adaptations based on it? Do you think that these efforts to send letters to African foreign ministers will do enough to get some countries on the same page? You are saying that Russia's war is to blame and not EU sanctions for this global food crisis, but clearly some are not on the same page. Is there something more you can do there? So Borrell goes, you know,
I don't know who asked that question, but somebody's awake.
Somebody's exactly, yeah. So in a constructive mode, if there is a problem, we will solve it. But I have to know the problem. Nobody says that our sanctions affect directly agriculture and fertilizer exports. Nobody's saying that. Yeah, they are saying that. If someone said that at the beginning, they are not saying it anymore because it is clearly, it's not true. They're liars.
You get the sense he's arguing with himself.
You're liars.
He's having a pitched battle. He's having a narrative battle in his own head.
Right, right. On the banks, some Russian banks have been taken out of the SWIFT system, some, but not the whole financial system of Russia is de-SWIFted. See, so because we haven't de-SWIFted all of the banks, you can't say that we have messed up, the food supply in the situation in the world. See, it's not been 100%. There's banks still left in the SWIFT system, so it's nothing to do with us, not our fault. So, if we can pay up for our gas, everybody can pay for their wheat. So, in other words, having first said we weren't paying, we're not going to pay any stinking rubles for the gas. They've now said, okay, we'll pay in rubles, and they're using that as a kind of a sign of virtue that they've done something that they had no intention of doing, but pretty much they had no choice because otherwise, basically, they were told the entire European economy is going to come to a grinding halt. And so he said, well, he's using that to say, well, you can pay, we're paying for our gas, so you can pay for your goddamn wheat.
No, that doesn't make any sense because you're not opening an account in Gazprom Bank to buy wheat. You open an account in Gazprom Bank to buy gas.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
sorry, Mr. Borrell.
Yes.
You're mixing not apples and oranges, but you're mixing bread and gas. Okay.
But the point is that so he's using the fact that basically the Europeans have not been able to impose the sanctions that people like Borrell and all the rest of them wanted to impose. And he's using that to say, hey, well, things aren't that bad. Look, we weren't able to kick all of the Russian banks out of SWIFT. Hey, we're still paying gas in rubles, so things aren't that bad. Don't blame us for anything. And then says, so we have been in touch with the Senegalese authorities asking about their concrete problems. And for the time being, I'm not aware of any concrete problem. Oh, okay. That's good. So I guess you can go out and have a bite to eat. Maybe in other African countries, we are in touch with them. Maybe it affects the potash exported, not from Russia, but from Belarus. He's got this thing about this potash from Belarus. So we are looking at that. We are looking carefully at how the imports of products from Russia or Belarus are evolving in each and every African country in order to identify the problem. If there is some problem, it will be identified and it will be solved. and said, we're going to send letters to the bank, explain to them what they can do. But certainly I cannot avoid that some financial institutions decide voluntarily not to participate on the trade. This is what is called overreaction or overcompliance.
Oh.
And this has to be faced.
I guess he solved his own problem, didn't he?
And this has to be faced by providing information to the banks, providing information to the insurance companies, providing information to the transportation system. But one thing is some practical problems related with overcompliance, and another completely different thing is that our sanctions create the problem. Yeah, but you've now admitted your sanctions have made a very substantial contribution to the problem. I mean, that's it. You've admitted it. I mean, so what else is there? You've kind of pretty much admitted it. That is not the case.
Well, I mean, he made Russia's case for Russia without invoking Russia. Good job.
Good job. Let us see what happens with the potash from Belarus. But I have seen some African countries that have been increasing their imports of Belarusian potash. Some African countries have been increasing and others decreasing. The problem should not be blamed on our sanctions.
Yes, but there were sanctions on potash. So it's the person the institution that initiated the sanction that is responsible for it. So I mean, I don't know why he's talking about Belarusian potash. Okay, yes. I mean, it's a result of a sanction by the European Union.
Exactly. So somehow he wants to say, well, it had nothing to do with what we did on Ukraine. So somehow, well, that's a different issue. That was over the whole Ryanair thing. And therefore, well, maybe we can address that, but we're not going to address the Russia-Ukraine sanctions. But the fact is that he has essentially said everything the Russians are saying is true. Where are the lies? What's the disinformation? I mean, they keep saying Russian disinformation. What's the disinformation? What is that the Russians have said that isn't true? It is the sanctions. He's admitting it. It is the sanctions that is causing the food shortages. I mean, you can add a whole bunch of words and start going on about Belarusian potash, but basically you admitted it is the sanctions.
Well, the issue is, I mean, that even the term that the media likes to bandy about, food shortage. There's no shortage of food, okay? It's getting it to market. And these sanctions are an impediment, a serious impediment.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to lose your entire livelihood, your business, maybe even your liberty, why would you even get close to that, George?
That's right.
Why?
That's it. And that's the point about sanctions. I mean, sanctions have all kinds of knock-on effects. So for him to say, oh, no, well, we didn't actually target food and fertilizers. Yeah, but, once you target banks, you're preventing transactions from taking place. You target insurers, you're preventing financial transactions from taking place. If you're banning ships from European harbors and you're banning shipping companies from going to Russian ports, you're standing in the way of proper trading relations. Yeah, that is going to cause food shortages. Yeah. As you say, there are no real food shortages, but nonetheless, what you've done is spiraling prices of food.
Well, and Ukrainian grain is making it to market because that grain is not subject to sanctions.
Right. Exactly.
So,
yeah.
The impediment is the sanction regime itself.
Right.
It's obvious, and Borrell proved he self-goaled himself.
That's right.
with his the whole thing with letters and studying. I'm not really sure.
It's a lovely kind of.
His whole delivery is very weird.
It is very weird. It's a kind of Euro speak. We need to study, and you think, well, hey, there are problems with food and fertilizer in the world. Here's some Belarusian potash. Let's get that Belarusian potash to market. What do you need to study? I mean, I just don't understand what's there to study. I mean, it seems a fairly straightforward exercise.
Well, I mean, the Senegal president, Hello, Mr. Borrell, could you have a study on the starvation in my country? We'd really appreciate it very much. No, nobody wants a study. What people want is the EU to rescind these sanctions that are punishing the global South, not punishing Europe, at least in food. Yes, maybe it's more expensive, but at least they have it. This is very, very, and what we've had issues with increased food prices for years now, years. It's something not new. Now we have an impediment to getting it to market. That's what's making it even worse. And when there's an impediment to market, there's more scarcity. Scarcity creates a higher price. I mean, I'm not an economist, okay?
No, need to do so. But it's a kind of a fascinating, this Eurospeak and this fantasy world in which these people inhabit. They embarked on a course of action that was entirely predictable that it would have disastrous consequences, namely imposing sanctions on Russia, which is, the biggest wheat exporter in the world, which means that a lot of countries depend on Russian wheat exports. It had the entirely predictable consequences, and now there's a lot of having got their hand caught in the cookie jar. They're pretending, well, it had nothing to do with us. We were being very, very honest. We didn't do the food and fertilizer. So it's a they kind of they're doing this thing, and they have the same kind of thing on the Lithuanians. Oh no, it's not a blockade, We're just simply banning EU sanctioned goods from going from Kaliningrad to Russia. Not a blockade. Don't say it's a blockade. We're not endangering anyone. We're not sparking a conflict. No escalation.
It's very much akin to the illegal change of power in Kiev in 2014. Is that when the Donbass left, when you have the Crimea leave, that's because of Russia. No, you overthrew the government, right. And the people in the Donbass and the people in the Crimea voted for Yanukovych. You took him out. Yes. So you have an illegitimate exchange of power, and you're blaming the Russians for how people in Crimea and the Donbass felt. No, we had nothing to do. We had nothing to do with that. You had everything to do with it. Ask Victoria Nuland.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's a very good example, precisely that they're not looking at the consequences of their actions, which entirely predictable. It would happen in any country where you take out a leader illegally by violence. And one part of the country solidly voted for that leader. That part of the country is just not going to accept an illegal change of power, and they're going to rebel and they're going to secede. And if you try to use violence against these secessionists, well, chances are that a neighbor, particularly their co-nationals, will really object to your doing that. It's exactly what happened in the case of Turkey. We talked about this many times before, and in the case of Russia, here Russia only responded after clear and threat of violence. In the case of Cyprus, there wasn't even a threat of violence. The Turks just moved. I mean, it's like, the Archbishop Macarius was overthrown, and Turks just immediately invaded, even though Macarius was restored to power within 9 days. I mean, Yanukovych was never restored to power, but even so, the Turks moved in and have not moved out ever since. That was almost 50 years ago.
Well, the bad news is, everyone, as the situation in Ukraine deteriorates for the government in Kiev and its Western backers, the less likelihood there will be any sanction relief at all. So they're writing this narrative themselves, because George and I know, and our viewers know, that when the hegemon, when the empire, when they take a hit, they double down and they triple down, and then they get vicious, okay? Yep. And they won't care about the consequences of their actions, because it's some kind of messianic mission they're on, as though they burn the house down, okay? I really worry about food insecurity around the world, because it's only going to get worse. Considering what Borrell had to say, oh, we had nothing to do with, oh, wow. Well, you can't address the problem until you recognize what the real problem is. And we all know what the real problem is. It's Josep Borrell and the EU sanctions. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're going on, continuing to make the same apologias. And what clearly is upsetting Borrell, you can see how he keeps repeating himself and going backwards and forwards, is the rest of the world isn't buying it. He has these Africans which are stunning him. We're not buying this nonsense. We're not. Yeah, so they're saying we're not buying this nonsense, okay. And when they're not buying it, okay. I think we're back.
I'm here.
Yeah, we're not. So when the Africans say we're not buying it, then you have a problem.
I think we're back.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we should probably wrap up.
All right, I think we're going to wrap this up here. Getting a little bit of static here. Okay, okay. Everyone, we're going to keep an eye on these sanctions. Are only going to get worse for global food insecurity. I'm going to keep an eye on it. So we're the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Please visit our store. And today is Wednesday. It means tomorrow George has a live stream.
Exactly, live stream tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, whatever. And we always have a good time. Then when it's over and you head off for a well-deserved drink, think of little buddy. Think of how despondent he is when he stares nonchalantly at that little tip jar of his. He wants it filled up. We want it filled up. I'm sure you want it filled up. So if you've got a few bob in your pocket, think of little buddy and dunk the few bob into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help and friendship and support. The more you can help us, the more of these videos we can make. And above all, the happier buddy will be. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.